Right.
All righty. Howdy, folks. We will get started here in just a minute. Going to give everybody a chance to hop on. All right. Well, I see people are still joining, but we do have a lot to cover tonight. So we're going to go ahead and kick it off. For folks that I haven't met, I'm Emma Schmit, work for Bold Alliance as the director of the Pipeline Fighters Hub, and excited to be here with you all tonight to talk about fighting pipelines, specifically the Summit Pipeline. We have a number of different speakers lined up for tonight, and I'm actually going to turn it right over to our first speaker of the night, the great and wonderful Chase Jensen. Chase, talk to us.
Yes, welcome everybody. Thank you for being on tonight. I see some familiar names and some new folks on, so glad to have everybody here. As Emma said, my name is Chase Jensen. I'm the senior organizer with a group called Dakota Rural Action here in South Dakota. We're a grassroots organizing group. It's been around closing in on 40 years. Came out of the farm crisis. We've seen the way that big groups, big corporate moves or big federal policies can have devastating impacts on our communities. And so we get people together who are commonly being impacted by those to work for solutions. So that might seem like a pretty clear link of why we've been working on the carbon pipeline boondoggles. I'm going to share for a little bit here, just kind of a overview of what we're facing. And for those of you who are new, who got our letter or were forwarded the invitation to this, we're going to share a little bit of kind of the values here that have ran the work of our opposition to this project. So first, just to name, this Summit Pipeline project, the application was put into the PUC on the 19th of November. And so in South Dakota, we have a 1-year turnaround requirement. So that means that our state public utility commission has to give an answer to Summit, yes or no, on their permit by November 19th, 2025. There's a lot of time between now and then, and also the clock is ticking. And so we have one legislative session between now and then. And we also have a rapidly approaching intervention deadline for those of you who are being directly crossed or who are within miles of the project. There's a deadline early in January to jump in and have legal status so that your particular property, your family, can have representation through the hearing. And so we wanted to schedule this meeting so that we could get information out to you so that you could make an educated, informed decision about the best way that you can protect your property, and also so that you can get plugged in if this is new for you and find out what the opposition looks like to this project, what we're about, what we're up to, and find a way for you to plug in. So the Summit Pipeline project, just a real 30-second overview, right? They are looking to build a pipeline that connects ethanol plants throughout the region, about 4 or 5 states here, and ship all of it up to North Dakota, where they say that they're going to sequester it underground for permanent sequestration. This project is being financed by a tax credit federally that is making this very lucrative for companies to do. There's people who are on all sides of the political spectrum, all sides of ideas about the need for a pipeline, loving or having opinions about ethanol, thinking climate change is real or not, right? There's people all across the spectrum on all sorts of issues who are unified, thinking that this project is a bad deal for many reasons. And we won't get into the details of any of the particular things I just named there. But suffice to say, folks are working together in this coalition that there's really not anything else like it in South Dakota, where people are working across the aisle with each other, across ideological beliefs, political beliefs. It's been really cool to be a part of, to see so many people come together on this issue. So no matter who you are, what you think, where you're at, you are welcome here with us. And we are unified by our common belief that people shouldn't have to take the risk of this project so that somebody far away can make a profit. and also that we should have the ability to self-determine our local communities, what it looks like here, that we can prioritize our health, safety, well-being, and that is more legitimate than the profit of some company that's looking to make a buck. Some of the big concerns that we have with this project, to sum it up really quickly, is first of all, the use of eminent domain is not supposed to back projects like this, where there's private profit being generated. We do not believe that eminent domain should be able to be accessed by these types of companies. Now, unfortunately, if you're in South Dakota, which most of you are, I assume, you don't have that common sense belief reflected in our current state law. And so there are ways that private companies can access the power of eminent domain so that they can do a taking of land so that they can make money for their shareholders. We think that's ridiculous and wrong, and we hope to change that. And we've been trying to change that for the last couple of years, and we're really excited for this upcoming session and hopeful that we can get more progress than we've had. We start by talking about eminent domain because although safety is the biggest issue in people's minds, and rightfully so, the reality is if Summit hadn't had eminent domain hanging over people's head like a sledgehammer during easement negotiations, then they wouldn't have anywhere near the number of easements they currently hold. And I doubt they would get very many moving forward. Because if safety, right, if they didn't have eminent domain, nobody would sign an easement that put their family at risk, that put their community at risk. If we had transparent knowledge about the way that these projects possess unique risks, unlike any other pipeline project that is or could be in South Dakota, they would have to navigate this process with a lot more finesse and a lot more care than Summit has had to do, because they could just threaten eminent domain and sue people, which they have done, by the way, if you're brand new to this all. So safety is a huge concern. And when we say safety, what we're talking about is they're transporting highly pressurized carbon dioxide, which is an asphyxiant, right? If you are trying to put out a fire, you spray carbon dioxide on it because it displaces the oxygen. The fire doesn't have anything to catch, right? Or in our state, if they're going to mass euthanize livestock for some reason, if there's an outbreak or something, they're going to pump CO2 into the house to quickly euthanize the animals. CO2 is natural. It's in the air all around us, right? But it's a matter of how much the quantity is, how concentrated is it. And so when you have a pipeline like this, in the worst case scenario of a rupture, it's going to break all the way and release all the CO2 within the cutoff points right next to it, which could be up to 20 miles. All that CO2 is going to vacate the pipe really quickly. It's going to expand and it's going to settle. It's heavier than oxygen and it's going to follow the low point. And so there has been a documented break in Mississippi a few years back where an entire town was evacuated and 45 or so people went to the hospital seeking treatment. And so we're not out here saying the pipe is going to break at every square inch every year, right? But we're saying when you're planning a project like this, you have to consider the worst case scenario and plan for that. And we want to make sure that when the company is thinking, what's the worst case scenario, that we get to have say in that, right? That they don't decide how many of our lives or how many of our communities or how close to our churches or homes is safe. It's worth the risk for them. We want to have a say in that. And so, 3 years ago now, when people started getting the first letters from the company, we knew very quickly this is a well-funded, politically well-connected group. And so the only way that we can even possibly stand a chance of working and holding the ground for our interests, our communities, is if we get people working together from across the state in tandem with each other. And we've been doing that by writing county ordinances that we can put in place in our communities, sharing those with each other. We've been collaborating on, our legislative work and trying to figure out who cares about this, who's going to represent the people. And most critically, most importantly, we've done that by connecting people with legal representation, forming a legal cooperative of sorts that's been called the South Dakota Easement Team, which we're going to talk a good amount about tonight as Brian Jorde, an attorney, talks about the legal process with the Public Utilities Commission. And so as someone who's been deeply involved in this for 3 years, I can say to you that the most important, the most critical thing that has allowed common people like you and me to make sure our voices are heard and that we are represented in these processes, where usually it's like corporate interests or lawyers or lobbyists can kind of run the game. The only reason we've been able to stand up and hold our own is because of the South Dakota Easement Team and having such a large group of South Dakotans band together in a legal block, which they've been able to then cost share, made it more affordable, made it able for more people to be a part of. The work that those landowners have done by hiring Brian Jorde, by participating in the public utilities process, by even participating in the court system, but going all the way to the Supreme Court. We had a huge victory this summer, which Ed will talk a little bit more about. It was all made possible because folks just like yourself who are being impacted like this joined together. They hired an attorney, they lawyered up, and together they had a unified strategy and they participated in all these processes. And by doing so, they're able to point out the issues with the project. They're able to make our arguments, not just the way I'm saying right now, as kind of conversational, but before the Supreme Court of South Dakota, right? By having access to these venues, these audiences, have really been able to transform what would have been otherwise. Summit's project would be in the ground operating right now if it wasn't for folks who banded together to fight. And so if you're new to this, if you just got a letter from the company and then got a letter from us, we want to say hello. We want to say, if you're feeling alone or a little overwhelmed, we were there a few years ago. Welcome to join us. You are welcome to join us. And we'd be glad to have you. And truly, we think that the best way to protect your land, to get educated, even to find the other folks who have been at this, who feel the same way you're feeling, is to get involved with us. And we plan to be active. Each of our groups will be active here in the upcoming legislative session and through the permitting process. And so if you're looking to learn more, if you're looking to find who else is out there that read the letter from the company and thought this doesn't smell right, well, you're in the right place tonight. And we're excited that you're here. We hope to answer all your questions. So I'm going to pass it back to Emma.
Thank you, Chase. Really appreciate it. If folks have any questions about what Chase just covered or what Ed and Brian are going to cover, feel free to pop them in the chat, or there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Or, because we just have all the options in the world, if you are on the phone or you just don't want to use the chat, I guess, you can give me a text at 712-830-3748, and I will relay your question. That's 712-830-3748. Do not use that phone number to prank call me. I will be very upset if you use it for that purpose, just for questions, please. But perfect. So that's again, if you have any questions at any time tonight, go ahead and pop them in and we will make sure we get to them. I also want to just be sure to mention that we recently just put together a landowner guide to carbon pipeline resistance that is now up on the South Dakota Easement Team website. So if you go to sdeasement.org, you can go ahead and check out our wonderful handy dandy landowner guide that covers all sorts of the different facets and things you should know about this project. So very helpful, and hopefully folks can get some use out of it. And with that, I am going to go ahead and pass it over to the charming, the inspiring, and of course, the good-looking Ed Fischbach.
Thank you, Emma. Yeah, folks, I'm going to just introduce myself. I'm Ed Fischbach, and I'm a farmer in northern Spink County, which is on the northern part of South Dakota, if you're new to this area. I've been involved in this fight from the very beginning. I helped organize the South Dakota Easement Team and organize the, along with a lot of other people, the coalition that we have here in South Dakota. And my advice to all of you is, please don't try to do this on your own. You need to talk to your neighbors. You need to join up with all of us in the group, because we're more powerful and we're more effective as a group than we are out there alone. And one of the first things we did, which has been a real benefit to us, is when we hired Brian Jorde as our attorney. And he has been representing us on all of these issues that we've had here in South Dakota, as well as all the other states up and down the pipeline. And we would not be in the position that we're in today without Brian's work and his advice. And I would just encourage all of you, If you got Summit pounding on your door, like Chase said, and you're looking at you now on a new route to sign you up and make you sign an easement or to try to get you to survey, let them survey, before you do that, you don't have to do that in South Dakota anymore, either one of those. It's not legal without your permission. But I would very highly recommend that you sign up with Brian Jorde and have Brian examine. You need to look at what they're making you sign in these easements and what you're giving up. It's not just the big money that they'll throw at you. You got to look at the fine print and what you're giving up for generations to come. So with that, I just want to talk a little bit and go right into enough about me. And I want to talk about where we're at this point in time and how we got here. And like Chase said, I want to talk a little bit about the things that we've done successfully here in South Dakota and the victories that we've gained. We started out this thing, like I said, about 3.5 years ago, and it brought to a point we held many, many, many community meetings all over the state in our communities to organize people and see how they felt and to point out the things that was wrong with this pipeline and this company, by the way, who wanted to come into our state and do business. While we did that, we found that we just got our coalition just kept growing and growing and growing. We got more people interested every meeting we held. And at this point in time, we've got a tremendous coalition built, like Chase said, statewide. And that led us up to the first thing I guess we had is that we had a case in rural Brown County, and I might want to explain. Spink and Brown and McPherson County are the three most northern counties on the route in South Dakota before they get to North Dakota. And those three counties, we have effectively blocked them from building right now because our county commissions have passed ordinances. But I want to start out how we got to that point. When the PUC started holding public hearings when Summit applied for their permit the first time back in 2023, we went to a lot of us and testified at those meetings. And one of the things that our commissioners, our PUC commissioners told us was that they wanted to hear from our local officials how they felt, our local county elected officials, because that was going to weigh heavily on how they came down on this thing. So we took their advice and we went back to our county commissions, particularly in those three counties. And there were two other counties in the southern part of the state that did the same thing. And the first thing they did was put moratoriums on. We got them convinced to put a moratorium for any work or anything further being done in the county until they had time to adopt an ordinance. And immediately when they did that, Summit Carbon Solutions sued them and filed a lawsuit to try to intimidate them and get them to drop the moratorium. Well, the counties held firm and they went ahead and after about a year of wrangling with them and going to many meetings, they put in ordinances. Each county has their own. They're quite similar in some areas and they have a few differences. My county in Spink was unanimous when they passed it. So was Brown, so was McPherson. They were all unanimously passed by their commissioners. So then we got to a point where Summit found that they couldn't, or they kept coming back to the counties that passed the ordinances and complaining that they couldn't find a route because the ordinances were too restrictive. So they went to circuit court in Aberdeen because they were even having trouble getting people to let them survey. So they went to circuit court and they filed a case against the landowners in Brown County and McPherson and Spink to let them, that were refusing them to survey. And the judge ruled against us at that point in time and said they could go ahead and survey and we couldn't stop them. And if we did, he'd hold us all in contempt of court. Well, we appealed that decision. And in the meantime, they went out to a local farmer in Brown County, and I think he may be on here tonight. His name is Jorde Bosley. And Summit showed up there against his will, and they came in with heavy surveying equipment with a big drilling rig, and they showed up with deputies. They showed up with armed guards, security, and they surrounded his farm. And it was basically under siege the whole day. And to long story short, they went out and drilled 90-foot holes into his crops, drove over his crops, drove through his farm, spent the whole day there, and just basically did whatever they wanted to over our objection. So we appealed that to the South Dakota Supreme Court. While that was under appeal, in the meantime, Summit had applied for a permit to the South Dakota PUC. And before that, there was a company called Navigator that was asking for a CO2 pipeline also in Iowa and South Dakota and going over into Illinois. They had their permit hearing last August of 2023. They appeared before our PUC commissioners. We have 3 commissioners in South Dakota. And through about a 3-week hearing with Brian Jorde representing us, our PUC commissioners unanimously denied the permit for Navigator. Shortly after that, a week or 2 later, Navigator folded up and pulled the plug and killed the project. The next month in September of 2023 is the one where we had to go before the same commission and argue that we tried to get them to reject the permit that Summit was applying for. And when Summit came in, we didn't even have to go through a hearing. Basically, the same day, the first day of the hearing, Summit's attorney and lobbyists told the commissioners that there was no way that they could operate under these counties with the ordinances in place. And they were asking our commissioners to preempt and supersede and throw out the ordinances. And our commissioners, thankfully, did not do that. And so because Summit had said if the ordinances were in place, they couldn't build the pipeline, our commissioners made the motion and passed unanimously to deny them a permit. That was September of 2023. In the meantime, Summit came back then after that denial, and they came back to the county commissions, the three of them I mentioned earlier, Spank and Brown and McPherson. And I was at two of those commission meetings when Summit came there. And what they tried to do was they offered our commissioners what our commission chairman in Spank County called a bribe. They offered them a whole bunch of concessions. They threw a little bit of money at the counties and made them promises with the caveat that they would overthrow or throw out their ordinances. And of course, all three commissions, to their credit, held firm, didn't buckle, and said, no, we're not going to do that. We passed those ordinances for a reason. We're here to protect our people, and we're not going to preempt and throw them out. So what did Summit do next? They went back to our legislature, our South Dakota legislature. This last session, almost a year ago now, starting in January, February, and March, they came back where they had their politicians put in place over the years that were in leadership positions, and they came up with a bill called the Landowner Bill of Rights, they called it. It was Senate Bill 201, which basically was Summit's same bill that they were trying to get our county commissions to accept and throw out the ordinance that then they rejected. So they went to the legislature, and through a lot of hard work, we were unsuccessful in getting that killed, and it passed, and our governor signed it into law. So that's what we were dealing with, and we had until July, or it would have taken effect July 1st. We had 90 days, according to South Dakota law, to refer that to a vote of the people, and we needed 17,500 signatures. In 90 days, we had volunteers in all 66 counties in South Dakota. I think there were like 500 volunteers that took out petitions to get the signatures. We came up with nearly 38,000 signatures in 90 days to get it on the ballot. And so we had a referendum on that scheduled here on November 5th during the general election that we all just went through. So we got that done, got it on the ballot. And in the meantime, before the vote this fall, our Supreme Court, as Chase mentioned earlier, came up with a decision on the appeal to the survey case that I told you about earlier on the Jared Bosley issue. They came out this past fall and summer, and they ruled in our favor on every issue, which they ruled, and there's three very important points. They ruled, number one, that Summit had not proven that they were a common carrier. And that's what's really important, because by not being a common carrier, Summit can no longer use eminent domain in the state of South Dakota. Number two, they ruled that what they were transporting into pipe did not qualify as a commodity. In the words of the justice who wrote the opinion, just because you say it is doesn't mean it's so, she told the Summit attorney. And she said, you're transporting a waste. It's not benefiting anybody. And the third thing is they threw out the eminent domain law that Summit was operating on and what they used on to go on Jared's property and other people. And so that's no longer constitutional unless the landowner gives them permission, but they can no longer go on anybody else's property to survey without permission. So we have them stymied. We had them in that position. And then again, that was this late summer, I think July or August, when that opinion came out. Well, then here at about October, Summit went back to our Supreme Court again and asked them to reconsider and let them come back in and make arguments again and reconsider their decision. The Supreme Court ruled against them for a second time and wouldn't even let them come in and argue, and said, no, you don't have any evidence. Until you got evidence, you can go back to the circuit court. And if you come up with some evidence, you can prove your case there. So that was another victory. And then we had the election in November 5th. I should back up. Even before the Supreme Court decision, there's one more big victory we had. Because the legislators, the ones that voted for this egregious bill that I told you about, we had a primary election on June 5th. And we, in the Republican primary in South Dakota, we had challengers for just about almost everybody, or at least probably 75% of those legislators who voted against us to pass the legislation to take away our local control is what that bill was going to do. To take away the local control from our county boards that passed ordinances, preempt that and put it in the hands of our PUC in the state. And the counties would not have any way to control that. So what happened? We ran people, we found candidates, and we were very successful in the primary election. We knocked out 12 of the 14 incumbents and leadership and incumbents that supported that bill against our wishes. So we in effect flipped our House, and this past election in November, we gained a few more. So now we feel that we have a majority in the House, and we have a very slim majority, maybe a 1 or 2 vote in the Senate. So we have all new leadership right now in our House and our Senate, and they're all people that we helped put in place. So we're looking forward to our next session. And now I want to talk about what happened on the bill in November, our referral that we put on the ballot. We overturned that bill. We were successful by a 60% no vote to 40% yes in the state of South Dakota. And we were outspent by the opponents on this issue that were trying to force this down our throats by about $3 million ad campaign they had against us. And we went out in a totally volunteer campaign with about 700 donors. We came up with about $220,000 to fight the $3 million onslaught that we had against us. We prevailed again. We defeated them. It was overwhelming. And I want you to know we won every county in South Dakota -1. We won 65 of the 66 counties in South Dakota. No one thought we had a chance. I had media people call me the night of and the morning after, and a couple of them commented before I even got to make a comment back, said, "Do you realize you've caused a political earthquake in the state of South Dakota?" And folks, we did. And I tell you all this because the reason we got to that political earthquake and we're at the position we are now is because we stuck together. We put all of our other issues aside, our political differences. This is nonpartisan. We work together. We're in for a common cause. And we're pretty confident our upcoming legislative session here in January, we're going to be pushing really hard for an eminent domain bill that hopefully will prohibit once and for all the use of eminent domain for a carbon dioxide pipeline. Now, in the meantime, Summit Carbon Solutions, they should have taken the message because, like I said, how many times? I think we had 6 victories over them now in the last 1.5 to 2 years. Anyone else would get the message, would probably leave, but they don't seem to. And so what they did was just 2 weeks after the election, like Chase said, November 19th, they turned around and refiled to go back to our Public Utilities Commission to reapply for a permit. So that's where we're at now. And that's what we're trying to get. And they've come up with a new alternate route. They're trying to find people that will accept it and eliminate some of us who have been opponents from the very beginning. We're not going to allow them to do that. That's why we want those of you that are new to the process and are just being contacted by them now, we want to inform you what are your rights here tonight and what you should be wary of and encourage you to join up with us. We will stay in the fight with you, but we need you to join up and help yourself too and help us in this fight. And so with that, I'll be open for questions later, but I'm going to turn it back to Emma so we can get to Brian because, and I just want you to know, without Brian, I'm going to say it again, we would not be in this position. You couldn't get anybody better, more passionate for our cause. And by joining together with the clients, I don't know what the number is now, but at one time we had 180 clients just in South Dakota alone. And when we split the cost, the legal costs, it sure helps, folks. It would cost you a lot less than if you went and hired your own attorney and you were all out there trying to do this on your own, coming from all different directions. So I'll turn it back to Emma, and we got to listen to Brian because he's got a lot more information than we do. So.
Thank you, Ed. Your words of wisdom are always the highlight of my day, my year, my life, all that good stuff. Just want to give folks a quick reminder that you are welcome to put any questions you might have in the chat or the Q&A box, or if you want to, you can send them to me via text message at 712-830-3748. And with that, I am going to pass it right on over to Summit's biggest headache, one of the only lawyers we actually like, and the guy that's been fighting for landowners for over a decade now, Mr. Brian Jorde. Tell us everything.
Oh my. Well, I just had a coughing fit here, all these compliments, so I can really take it. Well, folks, first and foremost, good to be able to speak with you tonight, and you'll get to ask questions and have those answered in a little bit. I'm sure, I mean, there's so much to talk about, but I'm sure most of you who have received a letter recently who may have found out that you're potentially impacted really want answers to the nuts and bolts type of things. And we want to get those to you. Before we do that, I want to run through kind of a big picture, a few slides, a big picture presentation to kind of orientate ourselves of where we are. So I'm going to share my screen here for a second. I've been working on these fights and similar for the better part of 16 years now. And what brought me into it is just the passion for property rights, being from a rural state of Nebraska and wanting to do right by landowners who so often get taken advantage of. Now, we're all here because of the proposed Summit Carbon Pipeline, right? And all these squiggly lines across the Midwest. I've been working with landowners like you, like Ed, like others, like people on this call in these states, fighting, standing up, speaking truth to power, and trying to put some common sense into all this for the better part of 3 years now. South Dakota, you may have been presented one of these maps. If not, I'll show you how to get to this information in a bit. But Summit has modified and expanded and changed its proposed route now so that the total footprint is over 2,500 miles. And I might just go back to this for a second. I mean, does anyone think that it's wise to put everyone through this much stress and hassle to move carbon dioxide to a hole in the ground in North Dakota across the Midwest, where it's going to sit there forever, at least according to Summit? It seems like if carbon dioxide is such a menace, there's maybe a better way to do this. But in any event, that's for each person to make their own decision. So I want to talk a little bit about the easement team and really what's evolved more into the kind of legal cooperative landowner collection of the legal team, and as well as the activists and the outreach and folks like Emma and Chase, who you've heard from. So the concept, and this was started in around 2008 in Nebraska on a different fight. But these companies, Summit in particular, they're not your neighbor. They're not your friend. And you probably have firsthand information. And I might say, as an aside, this is a public meeting. I fully expect Summit's listening in. I hope they are, because they need all the help they can get. But just keep that in mind with any questions you may ask, that they're probably watching us. But this is about education, empowerment, and then the nuts and the bolts of, I need help. I'm busy farming. I'm busy doing X, Y, Z. I don't understand this. I don't have the time to take on another full-time job and doing all this. Help me. And that's why the organization is here. And that's why what we've been doing. So a coalition of landowners, one strong voice, as you've heard and probably can intuitively understand. Without a connected coalition of landowners across the state, there's no chance to stop the system, the machine, if you will, of the corporatist politicians, the law firms that do their bidding, and the mega business that want to profit on your back. That trifecta unite to usually slam bad ideas down people's throats. And so Run Strong Voice joined together is the only way you can really have any type of leverage there. You don't build an army after the invasion. There's a lot of tire kickers, and maybe you're one of them, that have known about this for a long time. And well, I don't know, I don't want to get involved, or I don't want to invest anything. And I just say, hey, if you don't want to get involved and you don't want to invest anything, how important is your land? I mean, that's what it comes down to. So if what's at stake is important to you, then you probably want to get involved somewhere. If it's not with us, get involved, try to do it on your own, because it's too important to sit on the sidelines. And we take legal action. Sometimes we have to defend against legal action. Sometimes we bring legal action. The PUC, Public Utilities Commission, will be an opportunity and a forum to participate in the legal action and make your voice heard about opposition or concerns to the proposed project. And at the end of the day, if all of this fails and you're essentially forced, if they do somehow find a path to eminent domain, which I think is going to be tricky for them, and you're forced to enter into a negotiation or deal with the fine print of a complicated easement, then we can step in and do that negotiation and help. But before that are all the things that Ed and Chase have been talking about. Let me skip ahead here. The victories were mentioned because this is being recorded. I'll just hold this here for a moment. But the Supreme Court decision was a very big deal. The evidence wasn't there for Summit to be a common carrier. The common carrier is the path to eminent domain. If you're not vested with eminent domain, then you can't conduct any survey of any kind without landowner permission, and it's unlawful to do an invasive or below surface survey, deep dig, geotech, any type of invasive digging without permission, period. And so the first thing is you don't have to give survey permission. And why would you? So that's number one. You can protect your land and protect your property rights and keep them off your property by saying no thank you to a survey, as we did and my clients did in approximately 116 lawsuits that are now down to 7 that Summit wants to keep fighting about. Summit did sue in eminent domain before, and what do you think about a company that sues South Dakota landowners in condemnation, for condemnation in court across the state, when they didn't even have a permit, an application approved by the PUC to build their pipeline? What does that tell you about this company? To me, that's all you need to know about. It's just pure intimidation and bullying. And that's how they've shown themselves to be. And they double and triple down, and it just keeps not working. And it's just kind of confusing, but we suspect they'll continue on that path. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of the next steps. And pardon me for jumping around, but I know there's a lot of people with different perspectives here, and I want to get the nuts and bolts. So the next steps, the silver bullet to protecting your rights is getting good laws that actually protect you, as opposed to the laws that favor the giant corporate interests, because those are the laws you get. And why do you get those laws? Because none of you have lobbyists or the time to be down there. You're not contributing likely 10, 20, 30, 50, who knows how many thousands of dollars to political campaigns and schmoozing around and doing that stuff, and thank goodness you're not. But when you're not doing those things, then you're not getting the laws that favor you, right? So the landowner, the individual citizen, is always behind the 8 ball when it comes to legal protections, when we rely on state legislatures to make laws. And so the critical next step, and why we need folks to be part of this movement and support those that have forged the way for the last 3.5 years, and have really put everyone else on their shoulder, people they don't even know, like you folks tonight, we're going to have a strong effort of drafting, introducing, and passing property rights legislation, eminent domain reform. This is our 3rd go around. This is going to be the 3rd session. We got our teeth kicked in the last 2 years. The tide has changed, and the time is now to do a, frankly, once and for all eminent domain bill related to these proposed projects. The big one probably on your minds is the PUC, the Summit Take 2. They didn't get it the first time, so they're back again. Party status applications. Party status, you have to apply for what's called party status, which would make you, if granted, an intervener. That has to be on file with the PUC not later than the 24th. And I'm not sure if it's 4 or 5 p.m., but you don't even want to wait till the 24th, okay? You want to get that party status application on file. If you're like, this is too complicated, I don't even know how to do that, then get on board with our group. We'll do it for you. You'll be a part of our giant group. We set records in the Navigator and Summit dockets for the most participation ever in the history of any PUC process. That PUC process, it's not just about applying for the status. It's essentially a legal lawsuit. There's discovery, exchange of information, asking for documentations, development of witnesses, development of expert witnesses, picking apart their data. Where are the flaws? What's wrong with it? Who do we need to bring to counteract this? A huge thing is going to be defending the county, South Dakota county's powers within their zoning powers, and that is to regulate for the general welfare and health and safety of the citizens of a county. Because Summit, again, despite RL 21, where they were beat statewide 60% to 40% on the concept of local control being a fundamental value of South Dakotans, despite that defeat, they have already asked again that the PUC just throw out, completely ignore 6 counties and the hard work that they've done to utilize local control and pass common sense ordinances to protect the economic development and the welfare of their citizens. We have to fight that again. That's a big deal, and that affects all of you. That affects everyone not even in this fight if they want to water down and hurt county powers. And then, of course, there's a trial, a hearing, an evidentiary hearing. Last one went the better part of 3 weeks on the Navigator docket. I was in Iowa for over 8 weeks with folks there. And we need support for that, right? We need folks to show up and be there. Now, if you said, well, I'm not a public speaker, I don't want to really do it, we can work with you. Do you have to testify? Not necessarily. But typically, if you want your testimony in, you have to at least show up and say, yes, that's my testimony. But as you get into this, you will find your passions, the fire growing, and you'll want to speak out, I bet, and defend your land. But none of that happens if you blow the deadline on the 24th of January, which isn't very convenient given it's only 1 week after the last of the public meetings, which we'll cover later. Survey lawsuits, those are still going on. Those are potentially going to be, we're round 2 on common carrier. The concept it is sequestered CO2 a commodity. Is any CO2 a commodity? And the concept of for hire. County ordinances, people are still trying to pass the county ordinances, and that's a big deal. We encourage people to do that. And there may be new lawsuits along the way. Quickly on this, landowner rights, you may not think about all the rights, but when you hold title to land and you hold fee simple, you have surface rights, right to grow crops, improvement rights, rights below the surface, rights above the surface, rights to be free from nuisance, smell, loud noise, etc. Except if you enter into an easement, you limit your rights, because now where you are saying, I am granting you, third party hazardous pipeline company, for instance, rights that prevent me from doing all the things, or at least to some degree, of what I want to do on that portion of where the permanent easement is, and then maybe elsewhere on the property, depending how it's worded. So it's really important to know how severe it is of what they want to take from you and be on title with you and their rights at the courthouse for all to see for 99 years or more. What's an easement? It's something you are, in most cases, unwillingly selling. It's a grant of property rights to another on, under, across, through your land. You own the land, you pay the property taxes, you still have liability for the land, and now you have new liability for the existence of this pipeline, which I'll talk about in a bit. And then Summit, in this instance, gets at-will access. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they can pop on there, do what they need to do, or what they want to do. And oftentimes it's use of your entire property to get to where they want to go. So you want to be careful about the blanket easements and not just the 50-foot permanent right-of-way. Again, if you're even thinking about kicking the tires on an easement negotiation. Permanent, oftentimes they're permanent. Someone has said 99 years in some instances. That's kind of a long time. That's probably forever when all of us look at our lifetimes. One-time payment, you don't get to get repaid because you negotiated a bad deal or something bad happened in the future. They pay up front. It's not inflation adjusted for 50, 100 years from now, okay? And you sell the property. The person who buys it doesn't get to go back and renegotiate. It's over. And that can happen by agreement or condemnation. If Summit were to prevail and convince the Supreme Court that they are actually a common carrier, and if legislation doesn't get passed. I want to get into this because a lot of people are concerned. Don't worry, pipeline company will pay for all your damages. Not true. I've had an instance of a client that in Nebraska was removing a hedgerow with a bulldozer. This is taken from the newspaper, and accidentally hit two pipelines, and 252,000 gallons spread out. When the company Magellan was asked, well, as the landowner going to face any liability, they weren't so sure. Well, their lawyers were pretty sure, okay? And what happens is it's a backdoor way to sue landowners when there's damage to a pipeline that you didn't even want. And I got to spend 60 seconds on this. Summit might say, we, Summit, will indemnify you for anything that happens. And they don't say that, but just generally speaking. Well, guess what? Their insurance company isn't a part of that contract. They're not indemnifying you. So you do something to someone's pipeline, they lose profits. They say, hey, insurance company, this is covered under our policy with you, pay us money. And the insurance company says, I'll pay you the money, Summit. And then I'll just go ahead and sue, like Zurich, a gigantic insurance company, sued our clients in federal court for $4.1 million. Okay. So these are things you want to be really careful about. The fine print matters. We can't have you like this, not on the easements. We can't have you like this on the PUC, on the survey issue, on eminent domain. And unless you're going to really quit your job or spend all of your time working on this, you can't possibly get to where we already are. And that's why we think you should join up with us. Let's see. Well, we can do that in the Q&A. So I'm going to hit this slide and then stop so that we can get to questions here in a second. We'll deal with the future communications if you join up with the legal team. Compile information. We do every 2 weeks, we do a Zoom where we share information across everyone across the state, communicate the latest info and tips, handle all the legal actions related to the PUC, the survey cases, potentially bring new actions. And if then you have to negotiate at some point, then we're there to assist with that. And then I actually want to do one more pivot. I just want to look at quickly, and I know Chase wants to get on, but I want to look at the PUC website quickly. And so let me just share that since we're recording. All right. So for those of you that are first timers, you can go to puc.sd.gov, just Google SDPUC. You're going to come to a page that looks like this. All right. You're going to go to commission actions, commission dockets, hydrocarbon, carbon dioxide. And if you want to see what happened in 2022, you can go there. You want to look at 2024, click on that. And you're going to click on this. And then boom, now you're in to where the rubber hits the road of things that are going on. Okay, the public meetings, when they're happening, the party status applications, they're coming in. If you want to get involved, there's the application for party status. You need to fill out where you are, etc. If this is too much for you, again, join our group and we'll help with all of that. So I'm sorry I had to do this so condensed, but there's so much to talk about, folks, and so little time, and we want to get to your questions. So Chase, sorry I bled over into your time there.
No, that's okay. That was great. Thank you, Brian. And at the end here, we just want to throw out a couple comments like what's coming up, how can you get involved with this? But then also we'll hold a little bit of space. I see there's a couple questions that have come in. And so as we close in on the hour, if you have questions, again, please put those in the chat, put those in the Q&A so that we can answer those here. I'll also point you to in the chat was just dropped a couple of email addresses. If you have any questions, any follow-up you want to talk through, how do I get back to that website, whatever it is, go ahead and email us at those addresses. Brian just had it up on the screen, but I want to name for folks. Basically, the way this is going to work for the next month is there's going to be public input meetings on January 15th, 16th, and 17th. There's going to be 6 of them, so 2 each day. across the state, the eastern part of the state. Those are really important for people to be at. Yeah, if you want to put those back up there. These are going to be really important to be at. This is going to be important for you to show up. You have the chance to speak to the commission directly. All the commissioners will be there. You can give your input, you can give your concerns. And I think it's going to be very important. If anybody on here was at the first round of public input meetings a few years ago, it was pretty rewarding actually to be there and have hundreds and hundreds of people there. And it was clear the whole room was not in favor of this project. So it's cool to see the amount of opposition that's out there, that you're not alone. You're not the only one who heard about this and had that gut response. And so mark these dates on your calendar. Also, as Brian said, again, there's that intervention deadline. Once that deadline passes, even if the pipeline is going through your home, right, you cannot get involved with the permitting hearing. You can't show up, speak, submit evidence of how bad this is for you if you have not applied for intervention, applied for party status, right? It's like signing up for the event. You have to RSVP, you have to get your name on the list so that you can show up and be part of the proceedings. We're encouraging folks who want to join the legal team, who want to get in with Brian, to join early. And Brian, I'll let you actually name what that date was, or if we can put that in the chat. I don't want to misspeak.
Yeah, so I guess real quickly on that, I mean, I want to be very clear. I don't make more money by bringing more people in. So it's like, what's in this for you? I mean, if you want to ask my wife, she's going to say nothing at all. Why are you doing this? Okay. But we're in it. We're invested. We want to see this through. And we've got such a great people that I'm very loyal to, that we're going to make this happen for them. And we want you to get involved too. But we're not going to wait till January 23rd and you say, yeah, now I've decided I want to get in. This is too big of a deal. You should be able to make the decision, quite frankly, immediately, if not sooner. And if are setting a deadline at a week before January 24th, because having done this for the better part of 2 decades, I know the scramble at the last hour and what it is, right? I know everyone who comes in late, and my staff's up, all night the night before, and it's not fair. So January 17th, let us know before then if you want to get involved.
Yeah. And I will put a word in here too, right? So I am an employee of Dakota Rural Action. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We're a nonpartisan group. I'm not connected fiscally with Brian Jorde. I had a Summit employee actually ask me as he walked out the door of a public input meeting 2 years ago. I forget which town we were in. And I showed up, I testified, I told people, if you're concerned, join the easement team, right? I was showing up at all the meetings to pitch this. And as this Summit employee was walking out, he asked me, so do you get paid per person that joins, or how does this work, right? We are here because we don't want this BS to happen in South Dakota. We don't think landowners should have to take it. We don't think our community should have to take it. The best way for this to work is for people to join together, not just to have that unified strategy and voice, but to share costs just pragmatically, right? We need to be able to afford to stay in it. And so if you have one person paying for a lawyer's bill, that's all on you. If you've got 100 people paying for it, you're only paying 1/100th of the cost to have the best, in my opinion, Brian, the best representation you can get on this issue in the state. And so that's why I show up, take my time out of my day to be here to encourage you, because this truly is the best way, I think, that you can protect your land. Be a part of this. The last thing I'll name here coming up is, of course, the legislative session in South Dakota starts in January. And so Dakota Rural Action shows up, we testify, we work on legislation. The landowner block, they all talk and share information, right? There's a couple other groups who are active on this. I encourage you to look up groups that are working on this, get involved with those groups, right? We have communications, we can keep people informed of what's happening, what's introduced, who needs to be talked to, what's going on, when committee hearings are. If all that sounds super overwhelming, that's even more reason to get involved with a group, right? You don't have to figure this out on your own, and we can help bring you up to speed. We can help get you plugged in right away, put your tires right on the road. So there's a couple questions that I saw. in the chat here. The first one is I'll answer this one from Brad. Have the latest PHMSA pipeline rules been approved? And if not, how can Summit claim adherence if they don't exist? So I will name, they don't exist yet. They haven't been passed. There's actually some reason to have uncertainty around what those are going to look like with potential shakeup coming at the Department of Transportation. So if there's any claim being made that Summit's application is already aligned with the incoming rules, I would say that's impossible. That can't happen. I would also say that we heard, anecdotally, I heard reports of stuff like that being said right away when PHMSA announced their rulemaking. So if there's any claim like that sounds too good to be true, I would just assume that it is, right? Take it with a grain of salt.
Thank you, Chase. Oh,
Sorry, do you mind if I jump in there?
go for it.
So PHMSA, a couple things. PHMSA, don't pin all your hopes on the federal government to come out with perfect rules. I mean, yes, the fact that they didn't have any, pretty alarming. But who do you think is giving them the most input on what the rules should be? Well, it's industry, so that industry can have federal minimums that they can trip over and declare success. All right. So don't pin all your hopes on PHMSA and the feds. What you've got to focus on is what can you as a South Dakotan landowner do in the South Dakota process to take care of this right here and now. Because you saw that map I showed up. It's like the old game of Battleship and we're trying to get territory, right? If South Dakota can hold, they have a real problem with this entire project and they're going to have to rethink it. So boom, what you can do and have a real voice is South Dakota centric. What happens at the federal level, we have very little control of.
Wonderful. Thank you. Got a handful of other questions. Starting, well, now with how does Summit plan to maintain a fund to compensate property owners for damages caused by any ruptures or leaks of a pipeline? And how will they maintain that fund for 20 to 30 years into the future or longer?
That's a great question. And they don't have to have a fund, and there's no law requiring them to have a fund. And this isn't like oil where the oil companies pay into a liability fund in a catastrophic place where you can tap into it if needed in a catastrophic event. So they may have a bond that's in place that's supposed to cover it. They claim they have insurance or that they will get insurance. They don't have it yet. But let's imagine that they had money to cover damages that occur on your property. I practice all types of law over my career, and in a wrongful death case, I can go out and get money for the family of the deceased. And here's your money. The question is, do you feel whole? Do you feel repaired? And so if a catastrophic event happens, you may get money one day after fighting and fighting and fighting if you don't give up, but it's never going to put you back to where you were. So the fact of the very existence is the problem. And then on top of that, there's so much wiggle room where they can get around it. And by the way, in 7 years, if this goes through in 7 years, you won't even know who Summit is because they will have sold it before the expiration of the 12-year of the tax credits and cash out and move on to their next boondoggle.
Perfect. What percentage of voluntary easements have been signed?
If you believe Summit, 60%, well, I don't believe any voluntary easements have been signed, okay? But people have signed, for some reason, a document called an easement. Summit claims 60%, which means that 40% unsigned. It's an incredible opportunity for all of you to multiply and tell everyone else and to get on board here.
Perfect. If we don't have land that is being crossed, what do we put as a reason to be an intervener on the party status application?
Yeah, great question. So 10 miles was the threshold. If you live, own land, have a business within 10 miles of the route, that was the old threshold a year ago. Now all of a sudden the PUC is saying, actually, how about 2 miles? And then Summit Insta files, yeah, we agree. Like, wow, how did they do that so fast? But anyway, So now they're saying 2 miles. You have to be within 2 miles. So if you're within 2 miles, whether it crosses you or not, you're going to be likely okay. I would argue if you live in a county or pay taxes in a county that has the proposed pipeline crossing it, you are absolutely directly affected, directly interested in terms of the tax base, in terms of the health and welfare of your community, in terms of the economic development of your community. So I would argue, to be a directly interested person, I don't think you at all should have to be within 2 miles, but we may fight that out in the future. You want to do your best at tying in economic impacts, because that's what tends to move people, unfortunately, more than anything else. So how you're concerned about your community, first responders, volunteer firefighters, those type of community-centric things of how the ripple effects will be if this project goes through, and try to have a hook and a connect to those things.
Perfect.
Can I just chime in on that question a little bit quickly? In regards to that 2 mile restrictive limit now, I was originally being crossed by the pipeline. And now that they put in their new alternate route on their new application, it's supposedly about 4.5 miles away from me. And so when I sent in my intervener application, I got rejected last week because I wasn't close enough anymore. But then I found there's a little thing that you need to look on the docket. It's called Appendix 11. And when you go and click that on, what you will find is that Summit still has all of their previous routes up on the docket under that appendix, which if you don't know that, you won't find it. So because of that, I'm back in. So I just submitted an application, and now I'm back up on the docket because now I'm back within 1/2 mile and 1.5 miles with my house and 1/2 mile with some more property. So you may be in whether you think so or not, but look at that Appendix 11. And it's got all of the original routes. And what that means is Summit has not eliminated anything. So they're applying for this permit. And if they get that permit, none of us are in the clear yet that they can choose it, in my opinion, to go whatever route they want.
Thank you for that, Ed. Appreciate it. Few more questions. Is the PUC denying intervener applications? We just heard that, Ed, yours was originally denied. Are there any other instances that you've seen of that, Jorde?
Well, there's going to be a hearing, I think, tomorrow. People can listen in. Maybe we can email that around. And that's another thing. If you're dialing into this tonight, you should private message Emma your email so you can get connected, or somehow get connected. Otherwise, as soon as we end this Zoom, we're not going to be connected for that type of question answering. But yes, they're recommending that elected officials who aren't personally directly affected should not be allowed to be intervening in terms of concern for their constituents and their community. So the PUC itself is saying, we don't think you should be in, and then Summit instant files, hey, we agree, we don't think they should be in. So I've seen that instance so far.
All right. I know we are past 8 o'clock, but we do have a few questions to go if folks want to stick around. So quickly, what would be some helpful comments to prepare for the public input meetings? Anything that folks should be certain to mention?
Oh gosh, where do we even start? I don't know. Probably Ed or Chase might even be better at that. But the most important thing is to go there and be there, and then have the courage to stand up and when you have the chance, say, I am against this, and then have a few reasons to list why, so that the PUC hears that. So, but really, just a show of force is more important than what you really even say. But it's your ability to share your concerns. You can say anything you want, okay? When we get into the PUC intervention, then it's more like a court proceeding, and we have a little more handcuffs on what we can say and do. So the public meeting is your time to let the world know your feelings about this, whatever they are.
I would add to that, you need to show up at these public meetings in January, the 6th that they're holding in the state. That's crucial. And you will get about 5 minutes to testify. That's the way they did it last time. And we need to pack the room at all of these locations at each one of these meetings. We did that last time. and it had a real effect on the commissioners. So that's very important. Like Brian says, you can say what you want right there. You can remind the commissioners that they made the right decision the first time. Since that time, we've had a Supreme Court decision, and we've had 2 elections where the people have spoken, and there's no reason for them to go back on their decision that they had the first time, and we need to let them know that.
Yeah.
I let me just add to that quickly. And the preemption that local control is a foundational principle of South Dakota. If the counties have passed ordinances, they should not be preempted or superseded or thrown out, and just make a steady drumbeat on that, because that's a huge issue.
Yeah, and I would add, Brian, on the screen that you're sharing right now, that pipeline siting information guide is right there on that docket. This is a document the PUC puts out there, and on the top right there, it's got those 4 bullet points. These are the 4 permitting factors that the PUC makes a decision based on. If you're going to testify and share at the public input meeting, look at this, see what they have to evaluate this by, right? Because they should hear from you if you think this whole project is ridiculous, you're upset about whatever. But if you can speak directly to these 4 points, those are things that the PUC can hold on to and actually can carry weight legally, right? Because they can't deny a permit because Chase doesn't like the idea of the project, right? But if Chase points out some real reasons here, those are things they can hold when they're building out the case, whether they do or do not give the permit. So take a look at those too to inform your comments.
That's a critical point. I mean, the entire case turns on the evidence and persuasive arguments behind these 4 bullet points. So when you're saying things, for instance, I believe that if you approve this project, it will substantially impair the health, safety, and welfare of the inhabitants in my community. And then here's why, boom, boom, boom. And you just frame these in the positive and then lead in with a few examples. That's the very best thing that you can do.
Can you read those 4 bullet points out real quick for the on the phone?
Yes. So the applicant here, Summit, who seeks PUC approval, must prove that its proposed project will comply with all applicable laws and rules. We'll stop there. They're already saying we don't want to comply with county ordinances. Problem number 1. Number 2, that their project will not pose a threat of serious injury to the environment, nor to the social or economic condition of the people now there, the inhabitants, or those expected to come. So if you are in, say, an area that's of rapid growth, what does that look like? If you have a hazardous pipeline that now is going to be a force field for growth that you can't cross, you can't build on it, right? And you don't want to build near it. Is that a problem in your particular community? Number 3, that the proposed project will not substantially impair the health, safety, or welfare of the inhabitants. So again, you can get into, as much as people say, oh, you can't talk about safety. Well, of course you can. You can talk all about it right there. And then lastly, will not unduly interfere with the orderly development of the region, with due considerations be given to the views of governing bodies of the affected units of government. So if you are on a board, a township, you're on a commission, if you are on some type of governmental unit, have a vote to send in an objection, a vote to intervene, right? The views of the local governments make a big deal. And so these are very wide ranging and broad topics, right? They are cast a wide net, but you want to be fitting your bullet points under these things when you're making arguments.
And the only thing I'd add to this all too is, there's a comment of a quote of democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others, right? The reality here is like, this is the process, right? This is the democratic process happening. It's just these folks have more money, they have more lawyers, they have more lobbyists, they have more people vetting these processes. They helped place people in office for decades, right? These industries that have been involved. And so showing up, speaking, testifying, This is your participation in democracy. It's not just going to be you show up and say, hey, I don't like this, and then trust that suddenly it all goes your way, right? You've got to be involved, be part of this. And that's why you can't do it alone, but we can't do it without you, right? We can't do it on your behalf. The importance of showing up, testifying is really important. Speaking at these public meetings, I mean.
Thank you. I know we are now 10 minutes past time, but I do want to get to 3 last questions really quick. And then we will, if you have other questions, feel free to reach out and we are always happy to answer them. So what if someone regrets signing an easement with Summit? Is there anything they can do to get out of the easement?
Yes, it's not easy, but it's called rescission. And if the person who signed the easement relied upon a material representation that was turns out to be false, and that Summit intended you rely on that, and then kind of induced you that that was actually a fact, and that led you to enter into a contract, you could, if you can prove that, then you can reverse the contract. That's true for any contract of any kind. So for instance, if they said, we will just condemn your land if you don't sign this easement, that could be grounds for a rescission, because based on the law as it is now, not clear and probably not a true statement, probably could be challenged. So it's fact specific, right? If say it's an elderly person, I mean, they're sending letters to people that are dead. They're going to nursing homes and people in memory care units and hassling them, trying to get them to sign. I mean, there's no depth low enough for this company and the people they contract with and employ. So fact specific, get with Emma, get with me, and we can look at your facts and see if it's appropriate for rescission.
Perfect. Thank you. What are the odds of this project being stopped in another state?
Well, North Dakota's approved it. I just filed appeal documents on Friday for that. We'll see how that goes. Minnesota approved a 28-mile portion, their smallest leg in north central Minnesota. They still haven't approved the major leg. June 25th, the IUB in Iowa approved Summit's kind of phase 1. That's on appeal by myself on behalf of hundreds of landowners and a lot of other parties. That's just getting started. Nebraska doesn't have a process like this, so that's kind of the Wild West. Our best chances are South Dakota, period, end of sentence. After that, perhaps Iowa, we can get a good judge or the Supreme Court to decide with us. North Dakota we have a chance, but it's more difficult just because the politics are just, everyone's on board in the politics of getting this done. But we have a chance. We have a very good appeal issue that I'm excited about there.
Perfect. Yeah, I know from working in all the various states, folks are really counting on South Dakota. So pull through for the rest of us if you can, please. I'm gonna combine 2 questions, sort of, I guess. So what do you do when all of your county commissioners are pro pipeline? And on the opposite end of the spectrum, how can a township get to be an intervener? What do they need to do?
Well, so, democracy didn't just happen, right? This country wasn't just founded. It was messy. It was violent. I'm not advocating that, but you got to be noisy. And what I mean by being noisy, you got to show up to the county commissioners meetings, and you got to show up again, and you got to bring your friends, and you got to bring their friends. And there's sometimes public comment period where you can say whatever you want to say, try to get on the agenda. I mean, have any of you signed an easement? Have anyone in your family signed an easement, right? Let's just try to get the disqualifying things out of the way. Will you recuse yourself if this comes through? Why are you refusing to pass common sense ordinances to do your job, which is protect the welfare of the citizens of this county? I mean, you have to be confident enough and direct enough to be able to say those things and call them out. Because if you just sit back and say, well, they're all for it and you're not doing anything, then they're just going to skate on through, right? You've got to confront them in a nice way, but you got to be there and got to get noisy.
If you want to talk about county organizing, county issues, send an email to chase@dakotarural.org, and I'd be glad to talk about that. We've worked in all the counties that have passed ordinances, have passed them because citizens have gotten together and made a demand and asked their leaders to do it. and not all of them were excited about it. So there's a couple of the counties that started out like that, as you're describing, and we were able to pass ordinances. So if you got a couple other people near you that you can rope into it, no one can come in and do it for you. But if you want to gear up, we can definitely give it a shot. So reach out.
Yeah, the ordinances that are there now didn't just happen, folks. It's people like you going back in time 3.5 years, people like Ed that said, I've had enough of this. And month after month after month, and then boom, they finally get it. This is a marathon, okay? And we can't win it without you.
I would just add, it took us over a year to get ours in Spink County, which is one of the best counties we've got supporting us. So it does take time, but I'm not saying it'll take that long now because they've got the ball in the court and the other counties can pick up off of what the earlier ones did. And in regards to the one question about what can the township do is to be an intervener, your supervisors, you probably have 3 supervisors, call a special meeting and pass a resolution that this is what you're going to do, and then appoint somebody and then fill out the form that's there, and you can do it real easy. And also go to your small town boards, small towns here in South Dakota and your cities. We're working on the city of Aberdeen, their city commission, because the whole city of Aberdeen now, if this goes through with the new route, the whole city's in the kill zone within 5 miles. And so you can work on your town boards too and your small town councils. So all of them, they got to take official action and then they can sign up. Yeah, there you go. He's got up the one that Brookings County did. That's what they did already. Follow that.
Yep.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Emma.
Nope, go for it.
Yeah, so ordinances, emergency management, local response. I mean, what is your plan, people? Don't just tell me some smiley guy from Summit came by and said it's going to be okay, right? Anyone who says that probably needs to be fired from their job if they're in emergency management. But you can get the counties, you can get your townships, you can get your entities, your governmental units to apply for party status, intervene, get in here. What do they say? Brookings County Commission and the appointed officials have direct interest in all aspects of the proposed permit. Important to receive information as soon as possible so we can stay up to date with the process, etc. Right? Just get involved. This doesn't cost any money to send this in. So if in doubt, intervene and get in there, because if you miss the date, you can't think, oh gosh, I wish I would have, because it's over, it's done.
There's a good question up by Liz May there. Would you answer that one, Brian? She wants to know what the people in West River can do to help on this process of the PUC. What can they do?
Oh man. Well, first of all, thank you for being instrumental in the RL21 defeat and growing the coalition across the state, which started out, very small folks on the route. But what you can do, first of all, what you can really be helpful with is in the legislative session, get to all your West River senators that don't have as much pressure as the ones on the route do, and get them to support common sense eminent domain reform, support the landowner bills. That's top priority. In terms of the PUC, I mean, get the word out to anyone who may be on or near the route, and understand that people in your area, this movie will be coming to you at some point in some fashion. It may not be CO2. Maybe it's hydrogen. Maybe it's XYZ, ABC, things we can't even think about it. But if you're not involved in the fight for property rights and constitutional rights now, by the time it comes to you, it'll be too late. That's the biggest takeaway. And just let your representative and elected officials know you care about these issues. Send comments into the PUC. You can send as many as you want. Email them. Let them know. It makes a big deal.
Yeah. And the last thing I'd add to that too is the industry has big plans for carbon capture. It's a huge subsidy. It's a huge, corporate handout, welfare. And they intend to build lots of these projects. And so especially if we are successful in pointing out the issues with the East River project, there's potential sequestration West River or near the Black Hills or in Wyoming. And so who's to say there aren't future projects? I don't think it's crazy for West River counties to even start passing ordinances, because we don't know what they're looking at with citing these types of projects. So definitely being part of the efforts during the legislative session. And if you're not already on some of our update, like our email update lists, that's a good way to be plugged in to what folks East River are thinking about working on.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. With that, unless folks have any last minute thoughts, just a quick reminder that this has been recorded and it will be posted on the South Dakota Easement Team website by tomorrow. So that's sdeasement.org. Same website. You can also find the landowner guide that we discussed earlier. You can find contact info, all that good stuff. So sdeasement.org, always helpful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Chase. Chase, your email is chase@dakotarural.org.
.org. That's right. Yes.
I'm surprised I
Okay.
actually got that. Perfect.
Yeah, but could I just quick chime in before we all leave? I just want everybody to remember, this may seem like it's a losing battle at times, but we have to, like we said, stick together. We are winning, especially here in South Dakota. We do have Summit where we want them. They're on the run. They haven't won anything yet. And I want to remind everybody, we started this process 3.5 years ago. There were 3 of these projects in Iowa, Nebraska, and North and South Dakota. Well, and 2 of them are gone and they're dead. Summit's the only one left hanging on. And it's because we've all been sticking together in the work of Brian and others. And so don't despair. We can win this thing. I've been told over and over again, you can't beat the money, but we sure can when people stick together and we work together and we keep the coalition together we've got. We can win this thing. I just want everybody to remember that and don't give up, but join us and let's work on this and stop this together.
I can't have summed things up any better. So on that note, why don't we go ahead and close it out? Thank you all.